allegedly occurring on July 4th, and then a third complaint alleging excessive force, and that would be in conjunction with the July 4th arrest. Has everybody had a chance, certainly hopefully, to look over these reports and form some thoughts? Any discussion? Okay, so taking a bit of time on regarding the June 18th arrest, the staff's recommendation is that we sustain the allegation. It appears that he was ordered by the officer to leave. However, the county ordinance, or the city ordinance, specifies that all the rules that have to be followed have to be posted in the park. And this one, it seems, was not. So that is the basis of staff's recommendation. So regarding the June 18th arrest,
just as a point of clarity, so what you're saying is basically the officer asked that he leave the park.
Pardon?
That he leave the park.
Correct. Well, he had asked that he leave the park because he was allegedly not following the rules. The rule being that there can't be more than 2 people at a chest coach.
Okay. And
could you state your name?
I'm sorry, no problem. This is Ryan. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Also, and I know I asked this too. The question of the rule came from the security officers or ADIE upper management. It was something that they kind of made up. It wasn't like a policy or rule that they already had on the books at the time.
Well, I don't know if it was written down elsewhere. It could have been, but the investigation was that it was not posted in the park. Okay. And that's what the ordinance requires in order for it to be a lawful order.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any other questions or discussion?
Mozart, I just have a question that hopefully someone here can clarify. The initial approach to the complainant was made by one of the employees, the ambassadors, I believe they call it.
Correct.
Can somebody clarify for me what official or quasi-official capacity do the ambassadors have? Clearly, they've been employed by the what's it called, the downtown business group and so forth. Are they empowered to basically be a sort of security force within the park and other parts of downtown? And I guess what it sounds like here is once they had the need to actually enforce something, they would have to call APD. Can somebody just kind of tell me how the ambassadors are supposed to work with the police department so I have that clarity?
Ms. Robertson, did you do the investigation, or Mr. Lively?
No, I did the investigation. The ambassadors basically are there to just ensure that the park that the people are there to follow the park's rules. And they're in compliance with the park. Now, if there has to be anything that has to, anyone on the park needs to be arrested or anything like that, they don't have police powers to do that. They have to call you.
And that is my understanding.
That's just it. That's what they do.
I think it is very clear that they don't have arrest powers. They're just kind of the eyes and ears.
One other question. Is it, do we know if it is the responsibility of the officer to be aware of the policies of that park in order to maintain that permit that they have? And this is Ryan Johnson. Are they required, are the officers required to know that those rules of the park? Like the APD?
Well, I don't think they're required to know all the rules of the park, but if they're actually going to place somebody under arrest pursuant to a city ordinance, they certainly are required to know what the ordinance is. And the ordinance does state that the grounds for arrest on that basis is violation of park rules that are posted. This one wasn't posted.
It wasn't posted.
There
is no rule. This was just an in-house thing. No, there's no rule that says that a certain amount of chairs has to be at this particular table and a certain amount of people has to be seated, can only be seated. There's no such rule. This was was just something that people that were coming into the park were complaining that when they wanted to play chess, they would have to seat. So this is just something that they decided to just start enforcing, but there's nothing in writing or anything that says that this is the.
I'm sorry, does the park rule state that all attendees must comply with officer's request? Is that a rule in number 6? I don't have the park rule yet.
No, that's not.
Oh, that's not?
That's not
Okay.
the park rule.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, that's not the park rule, that's the city ordinance.
And since that time, I mean, they have acknowledged that this was an issue, so they no longer are enforcing this so-called rule. They now have taken up the tabling, the chairs, and putting out benches, and tables, and stuff like that.
And just to clarify, that the city ordinance section, it says, it prohibits disobeying a lawful order. And the key being lawful order, it's not based in law, there's not a legal duty to obey that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah, Mr. Robertson stated that standpoint that's no longer in existence. Is it fair to assume that a case like this might have set a precedence on that, the reason why they don't have that anymore?
Ms. Bogart, I think a reasonable person could assume that somebody realized that there was some lack of clarity in the situation, and that's why I go back to the question about the role of the ambassadors. I know why they're there. At least the initial reason for having that type of duty in downtown Atlanta was to make people feel safe and sort of be a sort of second line of defense for the police force, as Mr. Hall said. I know that the staff has recommended that some of the complaints be sustained, and I probably will agree with that, but I would want to say for the record that the officer here was placed in a difficult position, having to come in and then sort of deal with what became an altercation as a result of this confusion. So I think that qualification ought to be at least noted as we make our ruling.
Well, I will say, my tendency is to accept the staff's recommendation, but, I agree, I've seen some situations that were a lot less ambiguous.
Basically, the way I see it is just at the point of discussion, again, that he did call, he was called in, he's under the assumption that he's acting in responding to the law. And, he's basically trying to do his job, but of course, he does have the responsibility to understand his job, as law enforcement, being a law enforcement officer, president.
Well, also knowing the exact wording of the ordinance, and, the ordinance does state that it has to be written.
Yeah, and pretty much that's what I'm saying, he is the officer at the point of law, but
Okay, so regarding the June 18th arrest, staff's recommendation is that the complaint of false arrest be sustained. Is there a motion?
So moved.
5 seconds.
Just 1 second, please.
Yeah.
1 second.
Further discussion?
Yeah, just let it also reflect the fact that, ambassadors was actually put there during the Olympics to assist the police department during the Olympics, okay? And, not just there, just to deal with citizens at the time, they were carried on from the Olympics on, okay? Just to make sure that's on the record also.
Okay. Well, we
And
have a
this
motion.
next time I withdraw my motion right now, I just recuse myself from this particular part of it, okay? Because,
So you wish to withdraw the motion?
I withdraw the motion to recuse myself from this part of it because of my closeness to the case, being a civil rights arena, and I know about this case for quite a while.
Do you feel that affects your ability to fairly?
No, I don't. I was just trying to, basically try to do the right thing as I thought it might have been done, but, I think that, the bottom line is, to go ahead on with the motion, you know, because I'm trying to get my words together there, okay? The fact that, I'm gonna recuse myself from making a motion right now.
Very well. So, is there a motion from, a board member?
So, Trista,
Could you state the motion?
move that the, board send the recommendation of the staff to sustain the,
Domestic false arrest.
That is Wayne Walker, and this was June 18th, Walker for the June 18th, situation.
Twice the second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion passes, and let the record reflect that Mr. Williams did keep recused himself. Okay, the next allegation still with Mr. Blocker is false arrest regarding the July 4th arrest. Any discussion or questions?
This, Macy Williams.
Mr. Williams?
Yeah. Isn't this the case, that was out there near, Boulevard or something like that?
Well, no, these both occurred at Woodland Park.
Both of them referred to Boulevard.
But I think what you may be referring to, and we can probably discuss this later, but unless I'm mistaken, I think the same officer was involved in another case. We can talk about that later.
Right, okay.
All right, so, regarding the July 4th arrest, also at Woodruff Park, also involving essentially the same issues. Staff's recommendation has been to sustain the allegation. Is there a motion?
I move that we, this is Harrison, I move that we accept staff's recommendation to sustain the application.
I will second
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record reflect the motion passes, and Mr. Williams, you abstain. Okay, the third allegation, also related to the July 4th arrest, is excessive force regarding specifically the use of the handcuffs and the subsequent visit to the hospital, which is documented. Anybody have any questions or discussion? And the recommendation from the staff is to sustain that as well.
The location,
Sir?
that location was?
It's still Woodruff Park.
Still
He was
Woodruff
arrested
Park.
at Woodruff Park and he was handcuffed pursuant. So, there is a recommendation by staff to sustain that. And if the discussion is needed, there needs to be a motion one way or the other.
This is Harrison, I move we accept staff's recommendation to sustain the allegation.
We have a motion and a second. Motion is to accept the recommendation on the excessive force. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Let the record reflect the motion passes.
Again,
Mr. Williams is abstaining.
Mr. Chairman, Bozard, question. The very last paragraph of the staff report suggests that the officer involved actually had a part-time job working for the Atlanta Downtown Improvement District.
Correct.
And the staff recommends that incorporated into our letter would be a recommendation that not be continued. Again, this goes back to my earlier question, of clarity role between this quasi-enforcement group known as the ambassadors and the police force. I think sounds like they've taken some action, but I would just point out that that's probably appropriate that if the officer is part of that zone and does duty around the park, it would be inappropriate to also be employed as security guard, which I guess is indication here. Sheena, can you tell us what his duties were in terms of employment with the downtown improvement district?
Just to provide security. And he's been doing that with them for about 40 years.
So he could be there in the capacity of a privately hired security guard or an on-duty police officer, either, both times in uniform. I'd like to ask Ms. Price just to comment on that kind of thing that's gone on over time based on your experience. Do you have some thoughts on how you draw the line in those situations?
And my feeling at the time was that the officers would take a job that supports them, and that
I can't hear